Good evening, everyone! Welcome to another Mix and Mash Battle Lounge stream with the 2MK team. This week is another week of, hey, win 10 Battle Lounge matches, and as you may remember, one of the things we often tell you during those times is higher level players are likely to be more willing to play you for longer periods, and sometimes they're not necessarily going to be any gentler about it, but they're not necessarily out for blood either. Usually what this means is we hang around, and in this case it means that we're going to split up the team somewhat to go look for different opponents. Normally it's kind of courtesy to not spend a lot of time in those lounges when you have much higher level people than you. It depends on if you can keep up with them or not. But in most cases, keeping up with them is a bit difficult. It's good to get a long list of things you need to work on and other stuff you need to understand and changes to your flow. But at the same time, just because you've recognized how to beat the opposing player does not mean you should hang around in the Diamond Lounge trying to make sure you can physically do it. Chances are the answer is no. But for today, we're going to try to minimize matches that lead to long distance connections. Even though the netcode has been changed and the games are by most people's standards absolutely playable. I've tested more today and playable is definitely the thing I'd say it is. That does not mean that it is always pleasant. So for the sake of stream and less general frustration, we'll still be looking for lounges and people who don't necessarily have a flag that indicates they're too far away. Depending on the player, we aim to what we generally consider to be the level we can at least keep up with in these times. In most of our more recent discussions, for Kansuki Dynasty that has been gold. This absolutely isn't to say though that you should overlook anyone at your own level or even people of lower level. But do remember that in general, you should at least make sure that you're not being either a bully or a sandbag. So we've had a good look at all of the options for right now. This is a full search for all types of lounges. Let's see how far this will go. And of course, do expect to be kicked out of lounges, because sometimes people just don't want to play your character, don't want to fight you, don't actually think that it's worth their time to fight you even if you're lower level, regardless of the extra benefits of Battle Lounge. There's all sorts of reasons, and obviously not everyone who plays fighting games is nice. You'll see the team swirling around, and if we do see the same lounges, which is not always true, maybe it's improved now. If you see the same lounges, we may both show up in those lounges. If you are one of the people whose lounge we have joined and you don't want to be streamed, please kick us out. And I'll probably mention that as we go. Because you can usually expect that if the lounge has more than one slot open, you're going to get an influx of multiple 2MK members at once. Or a stream of the one after the other, depending. Because we will leave even if we can't keep up with you. But that does not mean that another person will not give it a try. As everyone has different levels of physical requirement for their game plans. For example, Kansuki Dynasty can generally pull off this matchup because Ryu is standard enough that Karine can normally handle him, but only if she is on point in terms of the anti-airs. Ryu doesn't necessarily beat Karine in footsies well enough that he can generally not jump. Pressure, on the other hand, is something Ryu can beat her with. This is therefore not the sort of place where you can quickly keep up with us, but you can always open the lounge and tell us if you want us to come fight you. Understanding where you are and where you stand in terms of general play style in the game and what you can keep up with isn't necessarily too hard. We actually have like a whole system for understanding this. There's different skills and strengths that generally come up as you go up in ranks because they're necessary to stay at the rank with other players playing particular ways. For example here, the skill that Platinum gives above beyond that of Gold in our general analysis is that if you are able to keep up with them, Platinum players are better at sticking to you. And they have more ways through your V-reversal. You have to do a couple unconventional things. And generally this isn't something that she can keep up with too well because it requires a backdash. Looks like that was not what they were interested in. And apparently not quite taking the hint. But as said, we don't necessarily aim for Platinum from her side as it requires things that she's not currently practiced in doing. And we can make this call for basically every team member to how high they should probably aim when picking a random lounge to join based on the things that they have practiced enough to actually get something out of it. For example, no one should probably join the master rank deranged here. But one thing we love to see, serious match. Because you know that the opponent is at least going to show you outright that they don't have time for you and probably play their main. Even during this time of this week where you actually get points specifically for beating people up as quickly as possible. So let's hope for and look for someone more within the range. And similarly, if you know your own skill set really well, while it is not necessarily a terrible idea to join someone with relatively lower rank points, you should be generally watching to see if the type of skill they're displaying is one that you're going to overwhelm. That absolutely happens. Let's see what Hard Rain 94 has to say, if anything. Perhaps it might say, I'm not playing you.
It's go time. Let's do this.
The general difference we found between silver players and gold is that silver players jump too much and don't know when to, and gold players jump really well. Meaning that if you learn to beat the jump, you might be able to keep up with them. Characters with more options from the air tend to be more stressful, but this does not mean anything if you're practiced enough. We don't tend to judge a player's competence based on aggression or defensiveness in itself, but rather how well they can either defend their spot while moving forward or stand their ground while defending and retreating.
Round one.
Let's see what we get from our Hard Rain 94 Ken. Most people will at least try to first feel out the opponent, see what they can and cannot react to, what they can and cannot do in neutral, and from there they'll make some decisions. For example, so far we can see quite a good set of spacing from our Ken player, and no general sign that they're going to give up just yet. That said, you do tend to need to demonstrate to players your superiority, or at least strong competence in footsies, before they'll specifically go, okay, I'm going to run away now because I can't do much else. There's also different levels of skill sets that are normally built up. For example, if we see crouch medium kick on your wake up from Ken, it doesn't generally mean anything to us. We don't specifically think, oh, this Ken has a really good idea of how to play this game. No, you learn how to do that really early on Ken. It just tends to make people frustrated and works well enough. That isn't to say that doing it, though, is a sign that the player is poor. It's a sign that the player knows that it works, and therefore will use it. Even if it's the only thing they do on wake up, the rest of their game is what tells you, is this player capable of keeping up with me or not? And the rest is just a matter of if you remember to block low on wake up. Please remember to block low on wake up against Ken. Flash of lag, but it looks like it's reset itself. But now we're getting into what for some reason my mind has decided to call soft lag. It doesn't make the game in any way unplayable. In fact, to me it generally makes it a little bit easier except for reversal timing and combos. But it's definitely not same old smoothness. Still, at the end of the day, netcode is netcode. And by almost all standards, this is better than it was before.
Round 1. Fight!
Ken can stand up to Kareen in footsies if Kareen's flow doesn't involve hitting very specific buttons. If she responds too much to Ken doing things and actually can't win the whiff punish situation, then he tends to come out on top just by having the ability to ignore neutral in more ways than she does. But it's definitely true that when he does get it wrong, she's often prepared to dump a lot of damage, and the situation gets evened out. Makes this fight a little momentum heavy. If Ken makes no mistakes and generally chooses the right moments to uppercut, he's more or less untouchable. But a good blocked uppercut from Kareen at the right time means that Ken loses like 300 to 500 health, and he at least has to work for it.
Round 2. Fight!
Kareen works well against Kens who jump by using Mayokin. Both charged and uncharged can be helpful. When facing Kens that don't jump much, she has to do a lot better in the actual movement part of the game. And also has to hold back buttons and play full on footsies. In other words, moving in and out of ranges that will make Ken hit buttons while still being completely prepared to whiff punish those buttons when they're hit. And this can be hard if you haven't gotten your idea of Ken's ranges well enough. And he has a lot of options to use at those ranges. Ken players often get better by recognizing that this is going to happen, and realizing, similar to what we've shown with Gil versus Cammy, etc., oh, I shouldn't use the same quick buttons I use all the time, because even those will get whiff punished and I didn't really need them. I could use something else. I could use something less conventional to get the same response, and probably at least mess up Kareen a little bit. He's not a character that cares a lot if Kareen just keeps on hitting him and poking at the edge of his range, forcing him to block, because eventually he'll just uppercut out. He can also do cool things with his crouch medium kick to help out there. Kareen in turn plays a very back and forth game where she's constantly moving around, and yet has to constantly be aware of how to end where Ken when the moment comes. Because One other good option Ken has, instead of sticking out buttons, is to jump. If he jumps every time, Karin's mindset is easy to change. She walks forward, she stands in a spot, she waits for Ken to jump. If you are willing to try with your buttons though, she has to decide which of those two things you're going to do, or most likely not going to be ready enough. How is this match going to go? That is 3 bars, and that appears to be a New Zealand flag. Is it New Zealand or Australia? I always forget which one it is. Are these even similar flags?
Let's do this.
Fairly sure it's a New Zealand flag. But honestly, they're fairly similar. And if they're not similar, then I really need to do some flag lookup. Either way, it's somewhere down there. Sorry to all the people, including this bison, who I am lumping into one geographical location by your flag data. Anyways, I'm not exactly expecting the Ken to have a great experience here. Or the other side, really.
Round 1. Fight!
Okay. Yeah. It would at least be difficult if you couldn't see, but we really don't know. Other team members may drift in at other times. We may, as we have done before in the past, go to their lounges when they let us know that they've had a good match and there's a space open for them to come watch their matches. Us to come watch their matches, that is. And similarly, we will sometimes look around for 3 or 4 slot lounges for the purpose of joining with more than one person. Might as well get XP all at once, while the strong player gets to get some variety. No idea. I can say that the things the Bison is doing sort of indicate that they can see properly. I know it doesn't look that way, especially if you're not familiar with Bison, because he is a character that just hits buttons a lot of the time. But as an occasional Bison player, I can tell you this is sort of indicative that he's got a thing going on. That said, a lot of the damage that Bison is doing right now could easily come from Ken just not being able to see what's happening. So I guess we're about to find out. Will they continue to have these matches? If the lounge falls apart, we will obviously be heading out to yet another one. No, it looks like they're gonna play this out.
Fight!
Which raises the question of whether or not we will be fighting the Bison. Despite the fact that they are playing in possibly advantageous levels of lag, this Bison player is generally relatively calm and not doing a whole bunch of crazy things that would take terribly strong advantage of it. They're making sure their scissor kick spacing is good, making sure their jump spacing is good, and you can't really just take certain actions out of your game plan because it might be something your opponent can't see. If you don't know that, then do them, and if they can't see properly, they'll leave. One thing that this does affect, though, that you often have to consider is whether or not the other person can do their punishes. And depending on the punishes they have available to them, just basically if you're playing in lag, have enough respect for your opponent to not do super risky things based on the fact that you've only been punished by a throw a couple of times. They've only punished you by throw because they don't have confidence they'll land their big combo. That does not mean you should slide in neutral as a general thing. Since Fountain Dynasty doesn't really jump that often, we don't really know what this Ken player's ability to anti-air is, but the game is definitely looking like it likes it. So we'll see what happens from there.
Final round. Fight.
Oh, they blocked it. Although that move is 10 and plus. So our Ken player has a good chance to turn this around given their massive amount of meter. The character has higher mobility, but Bison tends to ignore a lot of that because he's either going to not be there in the first place, or going to overdo one set of attacks or another. There we go. Z plus. Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's that laggy for the Bison player if they're doing that. On the other hand, there's a lot of time to do that, and the way the current sync of the game's netcode works means that if you see it and you feel as if it was laggy, because some people can actually feel that out, you press the throw and the timing syncs itself up. Believe it or not, people can, if you're a beginner, trust that eventually you actually can do this. You can learn to make sure that you do your reversal timing differently because the lag is there. It takes a while to learn it, but you can absolutely learn it. Your bigger problem is variable lag, which is, by many people's standards, why the old netcode was so terrible. If you have consistent lag, if you know that, oh, I saw a move, but that move is 3 frames late, you just do your reversal based on the move looking 3 frames late on your screen, and proceed. This Bison is, according to that status, almost gold. We don't know their full potential, but we're about to find out how laggy this actually is. It could be terrible. One problem with having the US flag being just a big US flag is that it's a relatively large geographical area that any one of the people can be in. But no, this is so far. It's still a little jittery, but this is not the type of lag where you go, I can't play this game. At least not quite yet. We will expect some dropped punishes and a little bit more problems in footsies. This is also actually a fairly good way to learn a specific thing on most characters. Which button to hit that won't extend your hurt box enough to get you killed, but will absolutely beat your opponent based on them sticking out their own button to stop you from doing so. On Karine, that button is generally either her stand light kick or EX Jinkaku. This is a good quick way to discourage opponents from just hitting buttons until you are put at their optimal spacing. And often you have to use a more risky button to do it, but being placed at other people's optimal spacing is bad enough that you generally have a good reason to do so. From there it turns into a matter of meter watching. How much meters does this person have? For Karine, the button is generally stand light kick if the situation hasn't gone the other way. If you don't have the EX Jinkaku to use, just stand light kick and hope for the best. Not because you're going to get a whole ton out of it, but because unlike most people's moves who do this, hers is actually fast enough to get the counter hit because the opponent has kept on trying to hit certain buttons. Understanding what are your pushback and control buttons and what are your actually do something and get punishes when people stop their pressure, they're nearly never the same buttons. But that's part of footsies as well. Understanding the flow in that way. So yeah, shoutouts to whoever managed to do this or the strength of the internet connection, but despite the New Zealand flag, I would almost call this playable. This is a very different style of Bison than we're used to seeing though.
Round one.
And as noted before, they're very near gold and they don't jump. Which means if they don't jump at gold and spend a lot of time doing their perfect jump spacing, it means they're probably near gold because of something else. And the something else is almost always their ability to keep pressure going in that way that makes you require the backdash. In other words, they skipped over the thing that makes most people get to gold and substituted something else, the thing that makes people get to platinum. You do need both of them, which is probably why they didn't reach platinum. Or maybe they just didn't get to play enough. That's much more often the reason. But from a quick analysis perspective, the chances are that you need to backdash away from this player. Finally just tree enough, but the EXPZ is doing its job. It does seem to be degrading a little bit, but hopefully it was just that round. The important thing to understand is that there are some tactics you need more so because of the situation with lag or issues in footsies. Meaning that if you run... People who tend to hate lag a lot are either really good at reading a specific type of spacing that rollback lag tends to make annoying, or they're lacking a specific skill that without it, playing in lag is harder. Usually this is a defensive skill, because you don't find people much complaining that they're losing because their combos are dropping. In a lag situation, you're not usually the one disadvantaged enough that if you are landing combos, you're going to lose unless the match was rather close to begin with. But we'll see if they stay, and if they do, we might head out, because depending on how the Ken's experience is, this is probably going to devolve a little bit. But we'll at least wait to see their opinion here on whether or not they're going to be playing. It looks like no, so wait, no, there we go. So unless it starts to look really stupid, we'll probably hang around a little bit longer at least. Other team members are probably off getting their own matches. You may see some reports of that in stream chat at some point, depending on what they're doing right now. Normally we coordinated this somewhere else, but there was really no good reason to do that on this type of week. Getting multiple different types of practice at once across multiple people without having to depend on someone to join the lounge and then be able to beat someone else in the team of higher skill. He changed to Kage. I can't see why this would help. On the other hand, it is once again possibly a choice relative to taking advantage of a situation. Kage is not stronger in lag, but Ken is technically slightly weaker because you don't get to play footsies properly. Kage has a couple more tools that would get out of Bison pressure, especially when in terms of V-skill and V-trigger. Kage's V-skill is a good thing to hit at max range when dealing with Bison because you get to armor through at least one hit. And Bison doesn't have a whole ton of multi-hit moves in pressure that will make your life miserable. Let's see. Yeah, it is V-skill 1, so we are likely to see at least something. Independently, Kage also has slightly easier combos than Ken, with his main disadvantage being trying to get in on people in neutral.
Round 2.
So I would say if they were trying to counter the lag, this is a good choice. Character with relatively familiar flows, same style of defense, but with at least 2 better tools for the purpose, and technically easier combos when you do land something. You can still of course see that we're looking at functionally a Ken player. Still hitting crouch medium kicking confirms, still using it for mobility. But you can definitely, if you were watching the first set of matches, see how the tools that were being used by Ken are not tools that Kage doesn't have. Ken's specialized tools, the ones that Kage definitely doesn't have, were not really the deciding factor in the matches we saw before. Him being able to fireball, for example, at certain ranges didn't matter at all. Cross cut, uppercut out of that move, good stuff.
Kage wins.
So it looks like they don't find this unplayable, at least not once they've got a character that is less reliant on the footsie's part. Meaning that there's a good chance that we'll end up facing off with Hard Rain again instead. But we'll see what adaptation comes, if any.
Round 1. Fight.
But there's a jump. It's a fairly easy progression if you're used to it and have thought about it enough. When you've run out of options that get you to your opponent in any other way, you jump. Or when you feel as if you've got control of this enough to make the jump something that they won't react to because they've been playing footsies for too long. There's an advanced type of jump that you only see from really high level players, but is so rare that pointing it out to someone in gold or platinum, or anywhere below that, often means they may not even understand what the purpose of the jump was, as anything other than their own regular reason. And this is not to say that they are bad at choosing timings for, or spacings for jumping. It's more so that a very prepared player who has practiced a lot tends to anti-air that specific type of jump anyway. In other words, if you kept doing the gold jump, as we've many times called it, at a level of master or above, you would get anti-aired even though it technically is hard to see it coming. This is usually because players at that level have literally physically learned to anti-air. Their body will do it for them almost. They don't have to worry about it in that regard. In the end, we didn't see any actual use of the skill though.
And Bison wins.
On the other hand, the Bison didn't really do the pressure in the same way, so it wouldn't have come up. It looks like someone's not happy about how this went. And given who won, I guess who that is.
It's go time.
Oh, no, it looks like they're headed out. Or dropped out on their own. Which means there's one space open here, assuming that the Ken sticks around in the first place. No, they don't. So we are off hunting once again. Once again for larger lounges so that we can get more people in. Or for any lounge that anyone mentions they want us to join. I think we normally ignore this person. almost always ignore this person. If you hear us say that we ignore someone, usually it's not simple enough to say, oh, they sucked, or oh, they kicked us out, or something. We remember those things. Most people remember those things. But there's lots of different reasons why it happens. King Rex, huh? However, fighting all night is not usually a good reason to join anything, and Ultra Diamond is probably a little bit above our pay grade today. Is Ultra Diamond right? Yeah, that's not. Zen Roberts. This is actually one of the sadder moments when you're searching for lounges. You know that you want to fight someone who can actually, you can learn something or keep up with. But you don't necessarily have anyone at that level, because Super Platinum... well, let's see. Notably, most of the time people just kick you out, so it's fine.
It's go time.
Apparently not.
Let's do this.
Experience the wild the hard way.
Nergy! Gold Nergy at that. We also have more spaces at this person's lounge, but that does not necessarily mean anything because 1, they're Platinum, 2, they're Blanca, and 3, as noted, you don't always get to see all of the same lounges. Even if your locations are similar, you might not. Where's the night fights, huh? Okay, well, here's the main problem with this matchup. Rosario is relatively bad at Blanca. There's a specific reason for this and it's really easy to understand. Blanca requires a sense of when to not do a bunch of things, and reactions to things based on what you think they are, not what they actually necessarily are. There's a bunch of fearlessness involved. Almost every character in this game has to do things that would be risky against everyone else, but not so much against Blanca. So it's a lot like fighting Rashid. With Rashid, you use the heavy Mujin and try to catch him with the last hit of the move. He doesn't easily deal with this. For Blanca, it's more often that you want either light or medium Mujin, but heavy also helps. In short, you have to use Mujin Kyaku in neutral for this matchup to make sense at this level of play, because Blanca has too many ways to move quickly and negate any attempt Kareem makes at getting in the first place. If you want to play footsies, you have to force them to respect you first. One useful part of this is that if you understand enough about your Mujin, you get to flow easily one way or the other. This is specifically because once you've committed to a Mujin Kyaku, you should be able to relax at least a bit. You know you're either going to get hit or Blanca has to respond. The only thing you need to read from there is, can you actually react to whatever it is he does when your Mujin whiffs? This does not work for a lot of other moves in this game, unfortunately.
Round 1.
Mujin Kyaku is really specific in its properties when it comes to these things. And it doesn't work well for most players because the spacings are more important than which move you do. Meaning that frustration becomes a crippling thing And Blanca players are generally frustration players, so you don't get to do much of anything.
Perfect KO.
So it looks like we have gone above our pay grade a bit again.
Round 2.
This is a matter of being comfortable with a move that is normally not used for this purpose, and with it not working in particular ways as well. Adding the complexity of doing this while still anti-airing a confusing character played by a platinum player's level of layered offense means that most likely you're just going to get flustered. So thanks Dan Roberts for the match, but it does not look like this one's going to work out. So to take a break for a moment, let's go see what the wolf is up to.
Let's do this.
Note that when we get to this point of a mix and mash lounge, it's normally very much the same as our usual lounges. In this case, therefore, you can search for the wolf. But it is more often that if you see all of the non-2MK players leave the lounge, we'll most likely drift off in our various directions to look for other opponents to get more XP. Playing each other isn't the aim of a mix and mash lounge so much. Being beat up by higher level players is. The Wolf's general aim is actually Super Silver, because gold players, especially against an Alex player with trouble anti-airing, will eventually just get annoying, and that's not really the word I want to use here, but if one is trying to learn to play better as Alex, and playing a bunch of footsies and your opponent decides in the middle of that to jump and do half your health and damage, when you are not ready for it, it's going to be bad. But we have gold, and we have Alex versus gold Seth. And it's of course flickering through at a high speed, but even so I can still sort of see how this goes.
Round 2. Fight.
While that Seth player is not playing some sort of incredibly offensive game here, the expected progression is that Seth has good jumps.
Looks like you could use more training.
Meaning the final result in terms of, oh, I want to win now, is more likely to be finding the right jump spacing, like that. And whenever down or feeling like it will not lead to anything good, more jumping is likely to happen. While this is still true at levels below gold, the usual reason why it's possible for the wolf to aim at that level is the opponent jumps worse. That's the best way to put it. Their jumps are not as well timed, they're not as well thought through, they're a little bit more, oh, I need to get some damage, rather than the, okay, I guess I don't have many easy ways, I need to distract you long enough to jump in and force you to play footsies. Force you to split your focus more accurately. You can't do both things. And this is kind of reasonable to think, because if you could do both things, you probably wouldn't be silver. It depends on the complexity of your character sometimes and how much you float. Or if you've ever listened to like high-level players like Luffy, they'll tell you to some extent when a character is able to carry the player. But it looks like they are laggy, apparently.
Let's do this.
So we will get at least one match of this type. This is in fact part of the reason why playing against each other doesn't always lead to particular types of growth. Theoretically, understanding that you shouldn't jump too much doesn't mean that your opponent doesn't need to practice with you jumping. The Wolf needs the point where he can play footsies, do spacing, and still have the anti-air ready, particularly the more complex anti-airs that Alex has to use for long zoning jump characters and specific timings of jumps. Specifically when an opponent who was at advantage decides to jump instead of continuing standard pressure. Very difficult for Alex to deal with as a generality, because it involves either a crosscut or trusting yourself really well on that stand like punch.
Fight.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that your training partners are going to jump at you often enough to trigger this type of requirement. They might understand that it can be done and therefore not do it. They might not want to disrespect you. They might just not have enough of a focus on winning, or have a different thing they want to do in their own matches that prevents them from taking advantage of your weakness. Even if they do it, they probably do it much less often. So we do have to get out of our quote-unquote bubble sometimes, at least in this game. We do play other games where we care less, and the game itself is either for fun, or for helping to make sure that we have enough understanding of it that if it comes up, you could aim higher or get better or help people out. But Street Fighter is one that most members take relatively seriously.
Looks like you could use more training.
Round 2. Fight.
Even if we don't all have enough time to use all the bots, there's still some stuff you need to work out. Bots can't even help with this specific thing. We have multiples that play a lot of footsies, force you to do that, and then still occasionally jump. If you are a player trying to work out if you're getting better at this enough to go, okay, well, I could probably keep up with the gold player, that's usually the better way to tell. Can you anti-air those bots? They don't jump often. If you've input them even close to correctly, they don't jump that often. They're not there to train your anti-airs. Anti-airs are often the D level, i.e. the hardest point of the bot, because you can go entire rounds without them jumping. Now granted, there's usually no D only level of difficulty for a bot. It's usually C and D. And you can win, and sometimes have to win, entirely by C. Noting that you have done this might not mean anything though, because if you missed the anti-air every time, if you didn't get any points in the D category despite the bot actually jumping, there's a good chance you're not actually focused enough for this to work. So, put in a little extra effort on those. They're usually not listed as anti-air work on bots, but they tend to have long zoning jumps and some weird setups. Your main good options, however, are all characters that, were it not for Champion Edition, would be someone you had to buy. And not all of them are all that recent either. Or rather, they weren't around for a long time, they are recent. Our main one for the purpose is actually Ed, even though Ed doesn't play a lot of footsies. Urian can also count depending on how you input him, but he often doesn't jump that much.
Alex wins. Round one. Fight!
Pyrokinesis. Yeah. Pyrokinesis. Yeah. Cryokinesis. Pyrokinesis. I shall persevere.
Looks like you could use more training.
Round two. Fight!
Cryokinesis.
You can go up through the ranks trying to do this though if you want to. Once you figure out how you can manage to get most of the things done for Birdie Bot, Birdie does jump occasionally. He also does other things you need to poke him out of the area. Akuma and Lara are also decent for it, although Akuma jumps much more intently. And if you figure you can keep up with Lara, because that's where most of us do the middle level of this training. Specifically, I think we've mentioned before, the ability to keep in mind what anti-air you should use even when Lara isn't jumping. From there, Kage, then Ibuki, and probably Zeku and Cody. With Cody being the one at the top of the list by most standards. Cody does jump fairly often, but if you can't anti-air Cody often enough when he does, gold is likely to be a little hard. Or rather, staying in gold. Of course, you could also be the one whose offense is good enough, but we're not talking about offense in that regard. Most people work out offense relative to their own character and specific situations. While there are definitely things we talk about in terms of opening the opponent up, a lot of this is based on managing to get out of scrambles without dying, and knowing when to push yourself. I.e., your opponent is doing things that you were not sure if you can get out of, but you have some option, and the bot normally teaches you what that option actually is. Whether or not you can actually do it, or should do it, changes a lot in the matchup based on the opponent's strength.
Gil wins.
But for something as relatively simple as jumping, understanding when you should and should not anti-air is paramount. Understanding whether or not you can anti-air is often the decider between silver and gold.
Round one. Fight!
It should be no surprise, therefore, that the President, one of our foremost authorities in the field of anti-airing just about anything necessary, is in the gold rank, and it doesn't really specifically matter either way, but it is helpful to be clear on what your limitations are. If you're going to get jumped on, then in order to stay in gold, you either have to be just as good at doing the jumping and staying calm while doing it, or good at anti-airing people who will. That is actually part of what makes the game difficult in terms of floating to certain levels for certain players and characters. If you're good at keeping your opponent in a space where all their jumps are easy to anti-air because that's your character's strength, then good. If your character's anti-airs are good, better. If you have neither ability, you don't tend to float into gold, you tend to float into silver. Regardless of your other skills, you have to work on the anti-airs. or just play more offensively and learn your own jump timings. If you've got a good offensive play character, you'll probably will manage. Of course, it also depends on exactly how hard you get hurt for anti-airing incorrectly or with the wrong timing, which is one of the problems, for example, with Nash as a character. When Nash is baited into anti-airing incorrectly, he suffers a lot more than most characters do. Whereas for most Cammy players, anti-airing correctly is just a relatively easy thing. If you get it done, good. If you fail, you were either going to die anyway or you didn't die all that badly.
Final round.
Ballas is a different kettle of fish. He can absolutely, once he's found the right spot, push you to a position where his anti-airs are relatively easy, but it's also not a situation where most people specifically want to jump at that spacing. And Alex players have to spend a lot of time focused on that max range if they're expecting to get any actual damage. Will the opponent shimmy out of my space or not? Will they whiff punish one of my very long and not necessarily terrifying buttons? That conversion. Double! And as much as we've said that Gil is not necessarily a character that does a lot of damage, if you get it wrong, that's on you. I.e. if Gil gets to start landing his damage after a lot of setup, you're going to die. But in this case, either the president is going to drop the bat or we are, because, well, it actually depends on who else is in here. Rookie Japan? I have no idea what to do with this situation. Let's play!
Let's do this.
And if our players who are currently waiting stick around, then we're going to trust in the netcode, I guess. One of the important aspects of this is knowing when you have to do something just to make the opponent think harder.
Harmony. That is the truth.
In other words, this match is not necessarily difficult for Kareen unless Gil jumps.
Fight.
Sure, the whiff punish aspect is hard, but Gilbot will fix that. Eventually, it'll just be, okay, I've seen that kick 100 times, I can do this. Or I will find the right spacing for your stuff. And yeah, Gil can definitely still win by damage in most setups, but it's not going to be a pushover. Kareen is not a character that has to fear him a lot. Because once he gets in, he doesn't get to hit buttons. It mostly comes down to, can Kareen react to projectiles properly? Therefore, that's her physical point. But you can see right there, that move alone is a difficulty for Kareen. Gil neutral jumps, and the situation is made instantly worse. This is true for a lot of characters against Kareen. Lara, Akuma, any character that has a good way to either convert into huge damage in the scramble, or negate defenses temporarily. Interestingly, this does not work as well for Rainbow Mika, but that's probably because her neutral jump buttons aren't as good.
It is time to proceed.
Round 2.
In her case, it's still sort of worse though because her footsies are slightly better than those characters. Gil has good footsies, definitely, but does have to stick out buttons for much longer and more easily countered than most others. he doesn't know what else to do, and feels as if Karine has gotten some form of advantage, neutral jumping or even forward jumping is often helpful, simply because Gil is so good at forcing Karine to think so hard about all of the little aspects of spacing in footsies. In corner, back jump works well. Forward jumps are less effective most of the time, but they can still help, and Gil does have a good cross-up. Especially when your opponent is low on life like this and you're not too terribly afraid of anything happening, you can go so far as to do the cross-up, knowing that your opponent might falter, simply so that you can set up your own use of super to chip out. Which probably would have been at least effective back in the corner a little bit ago. A light kick, cross up, jump in when you have full meter leaves your opponent with very few options. They can't necessarily afford to be reversal because they might get thrown. They can't easily anti-air because they don't even know if you're going to hit a button in the first place. And if their character doesn't have a lot of good anti-airs to deal with it, the worst that'll happen is that you get air reset into the same scramble you kind of were looking for. And then you just hit super and hope. This is a very Hail Mary tactic and not something you have to use if you're playing seriously, but if your opponent is even slightly defensive, once that V trigger is active, they're not going to be able to do much. This is actually an entirely common tactic because characters like Gil are able to use back jumps in the corner against people who want to seize with them or shimmy them with large amounts of success.
You win.
Which brings us back to what we were mentioning earlier in the stream. It's absolutely possible for Karine to deal with these back jumps if her mind is not on keeping you in the corner. Corner guard skills have to get much better before the back jumps stop working. And even then, technically they never really stop working. It's a matter of how overloaded the opponent is. If you think they're not overloaded yet, play more footsies. But the neutral jump is a good way of preventing Karine from doing a lot of good approaches, mainly because her way of dealing with it is hard to execute for a lot of players. When you've been playing this character for long enough to know how to tanko, you have a general muscle memory for a specific type of tanko. Doing the other one is harder, to say the least, and it does require an entirely different tanko to do. Fortunately for Karine, Gil's throws don't normally set up his jumps.
Round 2.
Which means that one of her strengths in this situation is that once she does get thrown, she's generally fine. She will end up blocking a projectile or something, but if she gets thrown mid-screen, neutral ensues. To understand without playing for a while why exactly the neutral jump matters, but it is simply because Karine wants to move around and play footsies, and the moment you leap into the air, she has to change the entire way she's thinking about match. Even if just for a moment, she has to change it. And if they're not totally focused, it's going to be bad. Unfortunately, that can't combo. There we go. the lack of combo ability did not matter that time.
It is time to proceed.
Chip damage.
Final round.
Can't be done again, but Simon's got to be ruthless.
In my grasp.
If you don't quick rise from Gil's throw though, he does get to use this option a little bit better. Because he can shimmy into jump, and Karine does not deal well with this. She does not deal well with this against basically any character, despite having a relatively easy anti-air for someone who does that at that spacing. It means that the player would have to be paying attention to an aspect of your movement that most cannot, and I literally mean cannot, pay attention to. Your spacing at the moment of jumping while they were thinking you were moving to their footsies.
You win.
But it looks like the fireball game is what led to the president's defeat this time. And I guess we had a Japanese... what was it, Seth? Nash, right. Let's see if they're still around. If not, we may drift away from this one.
It's go time.
Looks like no, so we're out for now. And the team will either selectively follow as they can, or continue their own training. First to 5, huh? Not the best thing to be doing on that street. Neither is that. Seems like everyone is on that floor right now. Hard Rain is back. The question is if they left because of the other person or not. Generally, one shouldn't try to join people who say seeking someone stronger than them, because sometimes they don't want to kick you out. But if your aim was to get there, you probably weren't going to do that. Hardcore match made character only first to 3. What do you have to say about this? While we'll never specifically tell you how to make your decisions about how to get in, we will mention sometimes what our experience was. And our general experience is that people who are rookie and make
It's go
8-person lounges are not as serious as you might like. Let's see if Hard Rain is willing to play more. As a tacit no. The unfortunate luck when the one person who is in the range that you think you could actually keep up with is 4 bars, but they're willing to take matches with people who are less, but it's filled up as it should. Catch that off, first one. If you're really serious about this game and you have only a limited amount of time to play, in this case let's count that as simulated due to the stream, you do have to make some relatively difficult decisions at times like these. You can't just stand here searching forever, because then you won't get any matches. But going either above your skill or into a lounge where people are not going to be serious enough doesn't really help anyway. Demigod, huh? But they appear to be only the third demigod, so it might work out.
It's go time.
No. People who have very specific requests are hit and miss. They're obviously looking for what is either at their level or just not the sort of person who makes a lot of thinking out of the matter of how do I get matches.
It's go time.
Will this person play? Let's see. You also have to get used to a lot of people being AFK. And of course, just making your own lounge is an easy response. Sometimes take a break in between there to do that and see if anyone is looking around for the equivalent of you. This, for example, should result in being booted out, mainly because they said they wanted a specific thing.
Let's do this.
However, you can at least consider sometimes that a player might make a lounge with the exact aim that they have of their own level of play. Namely, if you see, hey, I want to fight super gold people, and you also want to fight super gold people, there's a possibility that you might get along and be able to fight each other. So don't limit yourself too much in your decision making. That seems a little early for spectating halting though.
Let's do this.
No, that's more so likely to be because someone's connection is not so great. It's actually somewhat less likely these days to see Shoto versus Shoto matchups, simply because they're not a character where a lot of people play them without being really dedicated to them. Ken and Akuma are the highest chance you'd probably get. Kage is working his way in there. I don't think I've checked the stats in a while to see if somehow Ryu is still most popular, but I think he got supplanted by Akuma at some point specifically.
Round one. Fight.
Understanding this matchup, a lot of people say it is to understand Street Fighter. And at a certain level that is true. Before that level, it's all about the same, honestly. Shoto's being very middle of the road, with only minor variations in how explosive their damage is and how strong their defense is. means that to understand how to play them against each other tends to be a good test of your understanding of footsies and game flow, assuming your opponent doesn't have any glaring weaknesses. This has changed somewhat in Street Fighter V because there are less intuitive punishes for specific things that Ken and Akuma do. I always feel sorry for that combo because it's such a waste of meter sometimes.
Akuma wins.
Another decent reason to join this type of lounge sometimes is that if it's a 2 to 3 person lounge and you already got that one gold player that they were asking for, then basically they just get to fight twice and not have to think about it too much. I.e. the gold player tends to get a little bit more relaxed as they've got 2 lower ranked opponents. And the lower ranked opponents get to focus because they don't have to spend as much time thinking about how to win against the other silver player, given that they're unlikely to fight them. This is one of the upsides of our usual lounges. When a higher level player joins it, you don't spend a lot of time thinking about whether or not you have to keep up with your silver and bronze teammates. You can focus most of your effort on the idea of the gold or platinum player in front of you, as they're just the most likely to win. In a team setting, you obviously also benefit from being able to go, hey, how would you do this? What do you think is wrong here? But that could technically happen. That said, we could really be sitting here for a while only to be possibly kicked out of this lounge toward the end, one way or the other. That said, this is a good and good play. In terms of the things I would normally expect to see from a Gold Akuma, this person has basically every one of them. In a way leading back to the idea of the golden jump, because one of the main ways that is likely that our silver player bad boy D is going to get any damage is by choosing their jump timing. Aside from that, I'd expect this to mostly just be, oh, my scramble went weird. Or, you know, uppercut stuff. But if you watch it now, you can basically see that. There's not a lot of flows here where our Ken is definitely winning out. They're doing more and more crazy things and hoping those crazy things work. And sometimes they do, so fine. But there's the jump. This time defended, and jump again. Still defended. And it is the defense of those jumps that makes someone super go. So the question now is, do we have a match? From the Akuma we have the idea that we have a match, but we're gonna let them do that again. Mostly because I'm not done talking, and I'm going to be taking a break from talking after this, and therefore, hopefully, if the lounge does continue and no one gets upset at any point, we will get the match afterward. It can be really really discouraging to sometimes to recognize how vast a difference there is between you and anyone in a higher rank than you. And while it's not as easy to say, oh well, these people are gold, therefore they defend jumps, or these people are gold, therefore they jump in well, the data tends to represent itself. Are we going to get the same match? Yes, we are. And at the end of the day, this person has twice as much LP, meaning that not necessarily that they won twice as often, but they were able to keep it together at a higher level of play.
Round 1.
Normally when you see someone who's literally just gold, like below 4100 but still gold, they might have stuck themselves there. Technically the same is sort of true for Super Gold, but overall, given the way that the game pairs people up in ranked, if one were to continue to play ranked, you really will face specific sorts of things. So we're going to watch for a little bit, and with no disrespect to Bad Boy D, you just have to respect the rank for what it is. We see Silver versus Super Gold, which means that what we expect to see is a lot of damage through scrambly jumps. And those. And definitely those. One of the more important things for our side is to analyze and watch, has there been any other damage? They can do any damage through zoning, through footsies, through a scramble setup, through throws, setups after throws. Good pressure on wake up. If we count the Shinryuken as a form of uppercut, the answer for that round was actually no. Bad Boy D was able to win the match, but did so entirely through ES uppercut and jumping. We'll count the Shinryuken under that. There was, I believe, one hit, which was a scrambly crouch heavy punch. There might have been another. The general trend, though, doesn't really change.
Round 1.
When you find yourself in that situation, assume that your winning of the match has little meaning. It means that your opponent didn't happen to defend properly, especially if you've seen them do it before. If this were a match between a silver player and a bronze player, it's less likely that the jumps would be as important, for various reasons. But it would also be more likely that there were other reasons for it. Whereas here, we, I think, are still at that point. It's still been almost all jumps and risky uppercuts. Technically, understanding the exact correct moment to block and bait the uppercut would be a way to win this, but it would also be a lot of work. And it looks like it might have gotten a little tight. Even after managing the crouch medium kick, the response was to jump once again, which unfortunately didn't work out at all. Silver is not a place where you expect a lot of hit confirms though. We have, again, entire bots for training that too. Uppercut, and jump. A throw, but that technically you can punish your way out of that. But there we got to see something. We got to see something that, while it was definitely supported by jumps, was an additional way of doing something, a specific intent that did not revolve around that. And that was a recognition of a situation.
I did it. Final round. Fight.
The question though is, would it be enough to actually win the match if KOF Alexis was defending all the jumps? The answer is usually no, but it depends on the setup and awareness level. Cross up, cut. One good way you can do this if you've been watching the stream from the beginning, or if you're watching this in the archive later on, is to consider the difference between this style of play and that employed by Hard Rain earlier. But, once again, just because it's the thing you can see doesn't mean it's the thing you can beat. Meaning that if this turns into, hey, we're going to play now, that will make it Kanzaki Dynasty versus Bad Boy D, and I don't expect to see a different style or implementation of play. It's not going to necessarily fail. It didn't fail against Lexus.
It's go time.
But we'll see what happens. In order to prevent being like obnoxious about it though, I am going to be quiet for most of this match, and you viewers at home can count for yourselves whether or not damage comes from anything other than one of three things. Uppercuts, basically a neutral. Cross-up jumps, I'm going to limit it to just cross-up jumps at this point actually. Cross-up jumps and throw on wake up. We're not even counting the crouch medium kick on wake up. If the crouch medium kick on wake up returns, it's probably a sign that an evolution happened. Why does this work? Because this is how Street Fighter has always worked. When we didn't have all these complicated combos and couldn't play this level of speed of footsies, this was the game. So you have to remember, just because it looks easy doesn't mean it is.
Round one. Fight. Round two. Fight. Final round. Fight.
One other aspect of this though is an effect that I have not yet given a name to. When you do face someone in silver as a silver player yourself, it's simply that more of the things they try to do other than the jumps and things like the uppercuts, more of those things work, which means that they're not discouraged from trying them more often. It's not that Bad Boy D didn't Tatsu versus KO Lexus, it's that the Tatsu never worked. is one of the reasons why our Sakura bot can be helpful, even though it feels like you're constantly able to just block and let her do uppercuts and make herself vulnerable. If you view her more as a player you must attack when you're practicing your combos, you get used to the idea, oh wait, I half dropped my combo, but it's Sakura bot, she's most likely going to DP. And then you block, not because of the same mindset. You could do that. You could absolutely play the bot such that you stand there and wait for her to DP constantly so that you can get your punish. But it's much more effective to attack the bot at least a little bit with the intention of flowing to see if you can get yourself to stop your combo when you're not confident enough. Understanding that, yes, players will absolutely do, oh, they were leaving the lounge. Onward then. As I was saying, just because a player uppercuts a lot does not mean that you will be able to always catch their uppercuts. After all, most of us do our combos because we expect our combos to work. Already fought that Ed for the day. That said, that might more so be useful because I've already got data.
Let's do this.
I've already faced this Ed for the day. I got good Ed data from them. Put it on the sheet and everything. This is a good Ed. This is an Ed with a good sense of timing and spacing for a lot of things. But at the end of the day, they're still limited by what Ed is able to do. Assuming they're even playing Ed at the moment. We'll see. Because I think this was a character select on lounge.
Round
Yeah,
one.
here we go.
Fight.
They're also willing to do a lot more risky things by most people standards. Because they've spent a lot of time, I would assume, building up the idea of when to do those things. I'm definitely not one of those players who decided, oh, this move looks unsafe, better not use it. No, this is absolutely someone who decided, this move can't be that bad. I'm going to figure out how to use it. And this seems to have given them a really good concept of when to use their EX uppercut.
Ed wins.
Bringing us back to a similar style of Street Fighter. This person only really needs 3 moves. They can absolutely fight with only 3 moves. Can you beat those 3 moves? Generally, it's that punch and any other follow-ups that come from it, because there are follow-ups. The use of the skill at specific spaces and the cycle offer itself. I've seen them do other combos, they have some anti-airs, but they don't really need anything else. They sometimes use the kick when there's need for it, and have some stuff like that out of Snatcher. But we don't really count stuff a character does out of their V-trigger when discussing this sort of thing, unless they have a really reliable way to get to it. And Ed is honestly not that character. Similar to the jump and uppercut, you'd think, well, those moves are easy to punish, why would I even be worried? I just block them. Except that, if you do block them too much, they'll change their flow to give the impression that the move is not going to happen anymore. They're not necessarily changing the flow with the intention of doing anything else. See? Just moving around a little bit. Maybe throw out a sweep. Put on some pressure. None of this is intended to do anything really other than set you up for more either V-trigger stuff or getting punched. And while you're not seeing it in this match, I can show you that they have a good idea of when to do the punch without fully charging it, as in just charge a little bit and then punch you because you think it's time to do something.
Final round. Fight.
So, within the expectations of gold rank, this counts as a good ed. They don't necessarily even bother to jump. Or if they do, it's often a distraction from something else. But that move keeps hitting, and there's a reason that move keeps hitting. It's because the rhythm of the match that they've learned to create is such that you think that they're not going to do it, and then they do. Or they do it at a timing where your mind is so focused on something else that it's unlikely that you'll defeat the follow-up. EX uppercut through V reversal.
Ed wins.
There's a Bruce Lee quote that most people know that goes here. But let's see if they're willing to play.
It's go time.
Private slot on. For Ganzuki Dynasty, therefore, this match should technically be easy. But either the opponent will adapt, or we will see one extra thing that I saw while fighting them myself, and it will become a question of, oh, we will see an entirely different extra thing. And that in itself is a good response, because it implies that this player has mastered doing that with Ed enough to know that it's not necessarily going to work against Karine easily. So we get to see their higher level guile. Their style of play should have let me realize this is a guile, because who else would know how to master to use just 3 moves for an entire round?
Round 1. Fight.
Boom, V-skill, anti-air. Yeah. Probably should have realized. How is this dealt with from the Karine side though? We don't even have to consider that Guile is the character being played. What we need to consider is, how quickly can one adapt to this sort of thing? They do pressure purely so they can throw booms, same way as they do pressure on Ed so that they can do punches. Therefore, you're not generally in danger at most timings. Either they will make a mistake, or you can let them do pressure long enough, and I've definitely let them do pressure for a while without then hit them. I don't feel it's even necessary to V-reversal this player off. The main focus therefore is, can you Tenko? Mayoken also helps, but it's really a can you Tenko situation. And the answer should be no. And the reason the answer should be no is that we're looking at a gold Guile who has specifically aimed to learn rhythm. This is literally a rhythm game at this point. In fact, their rhythm is enough so that if you were to liken it to a song, one of the good mimetic ones that nearly everyone knows. Let me think.
Round 1. Fight.
Because it's kinda close, to Another One Bites the Dust. But it's a lot more like Rihanna's Umbrella. Of course, it depends on you knowing either of those songs for it to make sense, but the point is that the rhythm doesn't really change. You just have to know where in the rhythm they are, and you can probably tell which move is coming next. Now, like, you can't do it with another one bites the dust because the boom timing is on their hands, and if you haven't played Guile, you don't know the hand timing for booms, so you wouldn't be able to like feel out what they were pressing. Oh well. Karina, unfortunately, sort of lacks the button required for this. On Chun-Li, this is done by simply hitting back heavy punch at a particular timing. Karina's equivalent button is her stand medium punch, but as this is not the instinctive reaction to other people pressuring you in most situations, it's not going to come up a lot. Forced all the way to a defensive type rating. Our Guilebot 1 plays a lot like this. To the point where you could probably get the practice from it if you input Guilebot 1. But we do have a player playing now that has not generally had a Guilebot before, or generally not used their Guilebot, whichever it was. And it looks like they had problems connecting. So, we're basically to the end of our stream. We're going to look for one more, see what we get. And most likely head out afterward. Why did we fight? We did our Demigod 3 already. Oh well, whatever. Caterpie? One more look at the edge. And given that lag, they might feel a little bit less likely to continue this lounge, but we'll see what happens. Maybe it's not as bad as the 2 bars might indicate. This has probably never been true ever. But we get another incarnation of the Shoto matchup. So we expect to see mostly the same things. Ken is not here, so we won't get the same types of uppercut. Meaning we're likely to see more pressure in neutral, more medium punch things, and slightly less jumps because I think we've mentioned many times before that Ken jumps at that spacing because he's run out of buttons to hit, but his jump is really good at that moment. Ryu and Kage, not so much. Kage is more likely to go for a tick throw or just walk forward into something. And Ryu is more likely to either throw a fireball or bat dash. Stand light kick also helps. Still, it's probably not going to matter as much with the amount of lag I'm expecting this match to contain. So, yeah, this already looks miserable. Don't just do this to people, kids. Just take the L and go. Is it even gonna be able to finish the match? I doubt it somehow. Of course, it is fine to finish off your opponent as quickly as possible so you can both get out of here. Some people will still try to fight back if you do that, though. At least don't taunt them. Ryu is also better at the general, slightly better footsies, push you to a specific spot and get control at that spot, be ready to uppercut, that sort of thing. Ryu players tend to focus more on the uppercut than the get out of pressure free that is the Shoryuapa. But spectating being halted probably not being ended, and maybe just frustration causing the lounge to collapse altogether. So, are you still in the mood for fighting after that? It's 5 bars, you might get an actual match. They might not even be out of the thing yet, honestly. There we go. So now we are at last match of the night. This particular lounge will end whenever this person decides to leave, probably. But this is character select on, so we don't know for sure that there will be a Kage on the other end of this. So I'll reserve further note until we can see if it is.
Karin Kanzuki.
Kage.
As the Karin player, you should absolutely not expect Kage to try to play footsies in this matchup, because from the Kage player's perspective, that is a terrible idea. Why would you do that to yourself? If you had a good mastery of his V skill, and they've chosen V skill 1 relatively correctly, then you get that. Meaning that Karin doesn't get to play with you too much on her terms. But that still does not mean that standard footsies where you're actually walking forward and hitting the crouch medium kick, or the stand medium kick, or any of those things, should actually be something the Karin player is expecting. She should expect to need to anti-air correctly, and occasionally to get tick thrown out of stand heavy punch. Kage's goal is basically the same as Karin's goal, which is why I often mention that I could play this character, I guess, to hit with the maximum range of any punch or kick that he can manage, and then do something relatively unconventional from there, like that. Because no one likes getting hit, and being hit by a faraway move that you know is not plus normally makes us go, whatever, my turn. And Kage is good at making it not your turn. He just has to make the correct decision about what to do. There's the neutral jump, the control of that spacing and situation, the quote-unquote tick throw. But as you can see, understanding that because the opponent must occasionally commit to a move to go through your footsies, means that you get to neutral jump and punish that move. Kage is not particularly susceptible to this on all characters, but there are definitely some with a nice long jump or neutral jump heavy kick where this works out for him. Another thing that helps a lot is backdashing once he's already gotten control of a situation. Why? Because people get annoyed at this character and therefore get uppercut. He's also good at taking up the space if you happen to backdash, so mostly you want to keep the pressure on or wiggle about. You do, however, sometimes need or want to backdash out after he's hit you in pressure, just so he can't actually land that throw.
You lose.
So, we have our Silver Karin, who can play footsies but would have to get the opponent to commit to doing something she can neutral jump heavy kick, or will eventually end up facing the armored V skill.
Round 1.
Needs to backdash out of specific situations that don't feel like they should be backdashed, in her experience, like that one, and who will deal with being stuck by jumping and getting anti-aired. The result is that the match itself is predictable in the sense that it will tell you what you need to work on, but it's, by most standards, unwinnable.
Round 2.
the required skill level to win it is not something you learn during it, at least not most of us. Especially because Kage is one of those characters where you don't tend to get counter hits, because he's not generally doing counter-hittable things, and if he was, you had enough problems. Meaning that relative to these two players, relative to the expected flow and skill levels, this is good Kage play. It is also the expected and relatively, depending on how you look at it, good Karine play. But at the end of the day, it is good Silver Karine versus good Super Gold Kage, which means the result, while it can be close, is likely to be the same. So while we may keep on playing, tonight's stream is over. And since we do not have the standard lounge, you should not expect to be able to find it. You might be able to find Duel if he's still up. Join us tomorrow for probably more Eunice, and on Thursday for more Kame House. Friday, we do have some bot work to do, and you may be able to see it. But, as I've just said, this match is going to go more or less the same way every time, so you can find our bots at 2-mk.org and our information on when we are streaming and what on Twitter at 2_mk_FGC. This has been another Mishmashing Battle Lounge with the 2MK team. Good luck with your training, and good night everyone.